Hi everybody, this is your video notes for planning for individual spaces. So you're going to go ahead and fill in the Google Slides that we worked on earlier this week when we did the virtual universal design home tours. So you're going to need that open. You're going to turn those slides into the assignment where you found this video. So this video is created through Edpuzzle. So you may have used that before and questions would pop up. Questions aren't going to pop up, but this will tell me if you watched the entire video, how long you spent watching the video, or if you didn't watch the video. So please make sure that you are watching. I will know if you don't, and you will not receive points for doing this. I'll know that you copied from somebody else. Additionally, if you need to pause, go ahead and pause, or you can rewind. You just cannot skip ahead. Okay. So planning for individual spaces, this is part of the whole universal and accessible design that we have been talking about. We're just going to add in a couple things such as talking more about clients in general with this topic. So here are our learning outcomes for these notes. You should be able to, by the end of reading through these and by the end of this unit in general, be able to summarize the importance of developing a deep knowledge of individual occupant needs, explain the differences among ways to address housing needs, accessibility, adaptability, and universal design, research and describe housing features for individuals with special needs, summarize the principles of universal design, evaluate any characteristics of an existing home that would inform space planning. So going back to the last unit we talked about, and summarize space needs for individual rooms with a home. So your actual project for this unit will combine that space planning piece we talked about the past couple weeks with these universal design and client needs pieces. So that's where your project is going to come from for these two units. So clients and their needs. So we're going to look at what do clients need, what do they want as a designer, what am I being asked to do? So there's two different types of client needs: quantitative, how much of different things do they need, and qualitative, what quality or qualities do they want in their home? So our goals as a designer is to meet the needs of our client. If we don't have the client, we don't really have a job. Somebody is telling us what they want us to do, and we are trying to figure out how to best accommodate what they need. And as a designer, you're helping meet their physical needs of giving them a place to live or a place to spend their time, but you are also meeting their psychological needs. If somebody cannot get around or doesn't have a home, that affects their psychological side. So one of our main goals as designers that we really need to focus on is designing for all people. If we design for all people, then we are creating more inclusive spaces. So 3 concepts that will help us do that and kind of guide us through is, if we keep in mind, our accessibility, adaptability, and the universal design piece, which again, we've talked about all of these things a little bit. So in design, what do those 3 terms mean? Accessibility means designing to meet special needs. So if somebody has a wheelchair, we can make a space accessible by adding a ramp. Adaptability, designed to make future modifications easier. So in one of those home tours that we watched, they mentioned that they reinforced their ceiling in case they ever needed to add a lift. They didn't do it yet, but it could be adapted in the future. And then universal design combines both of these things, and up front we are designing to meet anybody's needs so that we don't have to go back and edit the accessibility or the adaptability. So accessibility means how are we entering and using a building if we are a person or there is a person with physical limitations of any kind. So mobility, vision, or hearing. We've talked a lot about the mobility piece, but the vision and hearing are just as important as the mobility. So the Americans with Disabilities Act, you may have heard of this before. It requires public buildings meet these needs. So doorways have to be a certain width, hallways have to be a certain width. There has to be a way for somebody with a wheelchair to enter every public use building. So for vision disabilities, there's a couple different things that we can do. And here is a list of different things that help improve and make somebody who has a vision disability have easier access to a space. Again, remember, I'm talking quickly through these. Since this is a video, you can pause at any time as you are taking notes. So just keep that in mind. If you miss something, you just cannot skip through this video. Hearing loss, it can make people have a hard time moving throughout a building. It's harder for them to just go up and ask somebody where something is, or if there's things going on around them that somebody who doesn't have a hearing disability might notice. We want to make things easier for them. So we can use devices that can be amplified, and we can add flashing lights. An example of this is an elevator. So if you've ever pushed the button for an elevator, usually there's some type of light that comes up when the door is going to open, but you also hear a ding. Well, if you can't hear or you have a hearing disability, that might be hard for you to hear, but that flashing light would help in place of that. Hand limitation. So in the virtual tours that we watched of the different homes, they talked a lot about hand limitation. So the biggest thing we can do in any space is having levers instead of knobs. So that could be on doors, having that lever door that you could just push down with your hand or push down with your elbow, instead of the door where you have to twist it. You can't twist it with your elbow. You can try, but it's probably not going to work. And then having locks that can also be used with a closed fist or an elbow instead of something that you have to turn. And then light switches are easier if they are push or motion censored instead of the switch. Because again, anything you do with your fingers, if you have hand limitation, you have limited use of those, and it can make even a light switch using your fingers to flip the switch up and down really difficult. So mobility limitations, again, we've talked a lot about this. We saw a lot about this in the different videos that we've watched, but having stairways, we talked a lot about wheelchair bound, but for people who they can still walk but have a harder time, maybe they use a cane or a walker, having stairways that have a good handrail for them to use, and making sure that the stairways have a non-skid surface. We don't just want a smooth stair because it can make it a lot easier for them to fall, or if they do trip, they might slide and injure themselves. And then short, wider steps instead of steps where you really have to pull your leg up high to go up. So in this picture on the left, we have a living space. It has a smooth floor, but on top of the floor, they put this plush carpet. And then over here, we have a living space with a smooth hardwood floor. This space is going to be better for somebody who is in a wheelchair because they can glide across this floor easier than the carpet. This carpet is very plush and it would be hard for the wheelchair to move around. So next, adaptability. So for adaptability, one thing we mentioned a little bit earlier this week is aging in place. So as you grow older in a home, what can be done to make it easier for you to continue to move around and live comfortably in? And then last, we have universal design. So we've talked about this a lot. You did an assignment yesterday with these principles, making sure that the entire space is usable by anyone. So these universally designed environments, they can be used by anyone without having to adapt anything. So the home is convenient and safe and comfortable and usable by all people right from the get-go. We don't have to change anything about it for it to be considered universally designed. In this picture here, from the outside, we obviously can't see the inside, but from the outside, this home is universally designed. There's that 1 in 20 slope. You could wheel right in there, get in. There's no step. There's a garage, so there's easy access into the house from the garage, a covered area to get out groceries or different things, since it may take somebody longer. I'm going to skip through that. So sometimes you're going to have existing characteristics in a home as a designer, and maybe your client needs you to make that home more accessible. So you need to be able to know what is and what isn't accessible, so you can go through that space and analyze it and decide what needs to be changed to make the home more accessible. So when we're doing this and in analyzing the home, as we're going through, there's going to be things that we cannot change. Those are our pragmatics. We're going to have to work with those and do other things to make the home more accessible. There's going to be interior landmarks. So that's like stairs. Maybe there's a wall that's a weird angle. We could change them, but they're pretty large staples in the home. Where are there windows? Circulation. So how does the traffic flow and move throughout the house? Is there more room to change that? Or are we going to have to do some renovations? So when you are designing the space, you need to look at the whole house. So is there in general, is it an open floor plan? Is there a lot of open spaces, or is it more closed off? And then typically, is like the furniture that they already have and anything that's built in, does it have good clearance space, or does it need more of that? So here is a chart of typical amounts of space that different rooms and houses take up. So for example, your bedrooms are going to take up the biggest percentage of the house, whereas your laundry room or wherever your laundry is stored doesn't take up as big as of a percentage. And we, again, based on the client's needs, you may be able to adjust these percentages in the home you're working in to better fit what the client wants or needs. This right here is a very useful tool. It is a list of clearance spaces that are generally in different rooms. We looked at this a little bit when you did the space planning notes. So how much room needs to be around different objects or spaces. So now what we're going to do is go through some of these different spaces and see what some different features to make the home more accessible in these specific rooms are. And again, this is something that the videos that you watched did a really nice job of explaining. So in the entryway or the foyer, there's usually a visual separation of other rooms. You don't just walk right into a big open space that has a bunch of closed doors that you can't see where you should go next. There should be a visual path of a natural way to flow into the home. Some type of window or peephole close to the door so that you can see outside the door and see who was there if somebody rang the doorbell or knocked. Another thing that we could add to this is now we have technology, so we could have a camera, a peephole, or some type of window to be able to see out the door. So in any entryway, so this would be any door going from outside to inside or inside to outside, flat entrances, so either that slope or a completely flat surface, handrails, automatic doors are great, those lever handles so that we don't have to use the knob, and good lighting. So maybe when you walk out the door, an automatic light comes on, so that you don't have to worry about flipping a switch or something, and you can safely go from in to out in a lit environment. So here is a couple pictures of our good and bad door handles. These good for everybody. These good for most people sometimes. I know in my house, I have this on my front door, and if you have a lot of stuff and you're trying to come in, this is still really tricky to use. And this would be a lot easier and more accessible for all people. All right, living rooms. So this is a room that we spend a lot of time in. The biggest thing with living rooms is making sure there's not furniture that's super crowded, so you have enough clearance space around all the objects, and that the type of furniture you have, there's room for somebody in a wheelchair to have their own space or furniture that they can transfer into. So that's again what this talks about. So tables and accessories, we don't want to crowd the room too much with little objects that could get in the way of somebody's path. Rugs help anchor seating arrangement, but again, we don't want to make sure they're not too plush so that somebody can't wheel over them or somebody with a cane or walker wouldn't trip over them. In our family rooms, which a family room and a living room, sometimes we interchange those words. Living rooms are usually more of a formal area, and then a family room is usually maybe where a TV is, and it's a more casual environment. Just making sure there's durable finishes and surfaces because people are probably going to be using this room frequently. Bonus spaces. So that would be any extra rooms other than a kitchen, bedroom, or bathroom in a home. Making sure that, again, they're accessible. You saw some of these different things in the videos that we watched. For example, the laundry room, having a single machine instead of having a washer and a dryer, having the ironing board that's easily accessible. In a library, maybe making sure that the shelves are at a height that's reachable for the client. So there's lots of different things that as the designer you would need to go through based on what your client needs and see how you can make all of these spaces more accessible. Okay, dining area. This is super important because people need to eat. So where are they going to be sitting? Is there a table that they can move around? If they're in a wheelchair, can they pull up to the table? It's not too high or too low. And then if there's anything like a china cabinet, a buffet, or sideboard, is it an appropriate height? So this is just an example of formal and informal dining. Informal dining is like any seating and eating areas in your kitchen. Formal dining is when the dining room is off on its own. It's a separate space from the kitchen. So the kitchen is one of the biggest areas that even if people don't make their home completely universally designed, a lot of people will redo their kitchen or modify their kitchen to make it more accessible because again, people have to eat and this is a room that you cannot really avoid using. This is also usually the room that needs the most remodeling along with bathrooms because you might have to change heights of different things. So if you can do this from the building of the home or the space, it will be easier. So what we're going to look at now are different layouts of different kitchens. So how they are laid out, what works better than others. So in every kitchen, we try to have a work triangle that is spaced out so that things aren't too close or too far apart. So we have our sink, our range, and our oven, and our refrigerator. We don't want them all right next to each other. We want space between each of them. So here are our different types of kitchen layouts. We're going to go through and look at each of these. So a peninsula style kitchen, it's like the U shape, but then you have this area here that maybe has stools right here that could be seated. Here is the work triangle, 20 feet from here to here, so it's a little bit less than the standard that we want. L-shaped layout gives us a better work triangle, but it still has not as much space right here. We still are only at 21 feet. Here's an example of that. U-shape, this sometimes if you have a really large kitchen can give us enough space, but like this one, it's only 17 feet from here to here. So it looks like a lot, but it's really not. If you were standing at this oven, you'd be backing up right to this sink. And if you were in a wheelchair, that would not give you very much space at all. Corridor layout, again, not good accessibility. We have very limited space between this side and this side. If your oven's open here and you're trying to rinse something off at the sink, you're not going to have very much space. One wall layout, again, this usually is in a very small space, so you're not getting a whole lot of distance. It would be better if something was over here or over here or over here instead of everything being along one wall. This is in that first video, or the video we watched about Shannon, who was in that a gunshot victim in her condo. She couldn't access the fridge when it was in this position, and this type of oven would be hard to access in this kitchen as well. So islands, a lot of people love islands, but if there's not enough distance around the island, it is not accessible. So in this example, it looks like there's more distance on this side, but over here and over here, we have very limited space. It would be almost impossible to open this type of oven here with somebody who is seated. So if we're going to universally design our kitchen, here are things that they need to have. So knee space under the kitchen sink and cooktop, lever type water controls, so no knobs that you have to turn, different height work areas. So not every work area needs to be lowered, but there needs to be a lower work area to make it more accessible. Contrasting borders on the countertops, so making it visible that there is some type of difference, that if you place something on the counter and it's close to the edge, it's going to fall off. Pull out shelves and cabinets, and then a pantry cabinet that has full length shelves. Instead of going up, you would go across. So here's just a couple examples. So here's that single lever sink. We don't have a little knob over here and a little knob over here. It's just one single lever. And then here's the pull out things in the cabinets. Another way to do this would just be having drawers that were deeper. Breakfast room. Again, this is the same as the dining room, just making sure that there is somewhere for somebody to eat or sit to work on something at a table with the right height. Laundry and utility rooms, make sure it's somewhere in the house that's accessible. So if it's in the basement, is there a way for somebody who cannot walk to get there to do their laundry? Same thing as if it's in a garage, is there a step down to the garage, or is there a slope or ramp so that they can actually get into that space? And then if you can change where the laundry room's at, making it closer to the living area. And then the master bedroom, having a first floor master bedroom is convenient, and also having an attached bathroom in an area that's large enough for dressing so that they can get dressed and undressed. And if they have a caretaker, that there's enough space for that. Same thing for other bedrooms, just making sure that there's enough areas and enough space to move around the furniture. Bathrooms, making sure that the bathrooms have, again, fixtures like the kitchen that have levers instead of knobs, and making sure that it is easy to get to the sink and the toilet from a seated position. Another thing is grab bars. So having those different places throughout the bathroom, having that higher toilet, it's called comfort level, so that somebody who has to transfer from a seated position won't have to adjust their height too much. Adjustable height shower head. It can be up for somebody that's standing, but it could also be pulled down from somebody who's showering in a seated position. And then a big thing too is making sure there's a covered area for people to get in and out of their homes. So we want to make sure that if they're taking groceries in, it might take them a little longer. We want to make sure they have a covered space that they can move in and out of from the home without having to be out in the elements if it was raining or different things like that. Okay, that is it for these notes. Thank you for watching, and make sure you turn your notes in.